Hello and warm wishes to all my fellow Americans, wherever you live, whoever you love, and whatever you believe. My name is John Russo, and this is Stranded in Centerfield. Throughout our history, we Americans have been set apart from nearly every other nation by the rock-solid commitment of all of our national leaders to a peaceful transition of power, even if their party were to lose power. Why has this been so? Well, because true patriots understand that eventually the political tide that ebbed for you in this cycle will flow back in your direction sometime in the future. And when that happens, your political opponents, your fellow Americans committed to a constitutional democracy, will likewise accept the results. There was only one instance in our history in which the losing side refused to accept the results of a presidential election. In that case, the state legislature of South Carolina voted to leave the United States a mere 3 days after Abraham Lincoln was elected president. Fewer than 6 weeks after Lincoln's inauguration, traitors in South Carolina were firing on Fort Sumter, an American military installation in Charleston Harbor, thereby beginning a civil war that left more than 620,000 Americans dead and countless more maimed and crippled at a time when there were barely more than 30 million Americans altogether. Many other countries have democratic methods to select their leaders. But it's not unusual to see massive unrest in those same countries when various groups are disappointed with the election results. From time to time, this disorder and chaos actually overturns the government, and in extreme cases, more powerful groups yet than the ones in the streets within such a nation will actually end democracy itself, allegedly in the interest of preserving the nation. And as happened to America in the 1860s, uncivil disagreement leads to civil unrest, degenerates into civil war. It is no exaggeration to say that maintaining our 160-year tradition of the peaceful transition of power, a tradition which has rightly earned us the envy of most of the world, can mean the difference between life and death, even here in America. In 1876, less than a dozen years after Americans were slaughtering each other, the presidential election between Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican governor of Ohio, and Samuel Tilden, the Democratic governor of the state of New York, fell into a vicious controversy with allegations of corruption and stolen votes on both sides. Then President Ulysses Grant, a Republican, created a special electoral commission of congressmen and Supreme Court justices, which settled the dispute over votes, especially in Louisiana. The result was that Tilden became the only presidential candidate to win more than 50% of the popular vote while still losing the presidency. Even stranger, Tilden won 184 electoral votes to 165 for Hayes. But 20 votes from 4 different states were disputed, with each political party claiming those 20 votes, and those 20 votes were decisive. Who actually won during this mess was never determined, and it remains an open question for historians even today. But it was resolved peacefully. The two parties compromised, Hayes became president, Tilden stood down, and there was, just 12 years after the Civil War, a peaceful transition of power. In 1960, there was credible evidence that Democratic machine boss Richard Daley held back reporting Chicago's vote tallies, waiting until after the largely Republican downstate Illinois vote came in with a majority for Richard Nixon. Observers at the time believed, with some reason, that Daley was waiting to see how large a majority for then Senator John F. Kennedy would be necessary for him to write in to give Illinois' 27 electoral votes to JFK. Now, this activity in Illinois, together with general suspicions about JFK's 2% win in his running mate Lyndon Johnson's Texas, prompted many Nixon supporters to urge Nixon to dispute the election. But Nixon declined, and there was no dispute, and there were no armed people in the streets of America's towns and cities. There was a peaceful transition of power. The last example is more recent, 2000. After a more than 5-week and bitter dispute, which resulted in Florida being called for George W. Bush by 537 votes out of nearly 6 million cast. The U.S. Supreme Court had ordered Florida to stop counting votes, even though the Florida Supreme Court had ordered that the count continue. Bush received Florida's 25 electoral votes, which then gave him, wait for it, 271 electoral votes to Gore's 267. And for the first time since 1888, a presidential candidate who won the most votes cast by all Americans was not inaugurated President of the United States. Al Gore, I'm sure, was disappointed, but he still went on national television where he said he disagreed with the Supreme Court decision, but accepted it. Now, Al Gore and George W. Bush apparently did not like each other very much. But in the weeks after this Supreme Court decision, they worked together and were photographed very publicly in order to ensure a smooth and peaceful transition of power. In light of this great history, President Trump's refusal to commit to a peaceful transition of power, his rhetorical calls to rebellion, his disputing the counts in states with Republican governors and Secretary of States as fraudulent, is downright unpatriotic, declaring that our election system is a fraud with little evidence, and before going to court to present whatever evidence he has, can only give comfort to the enemies of America and of democracy itself all over the world. President Trump is very controversial, but whatever you think of his performance in his 4 years as president, I can assure you history will not view his behavior these past few days kindly. His legacy will be forever stained as he is judged by future Americans to have been a selfish man who neither understood nor cherished the most basic political values that actually made America great. Unwritten but important values that will, pray God, in the future, still continue to animate the love of country and ideas like the peaceful transition of power that lay at the very beating heart of our American Republic. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Please leave your civil comments and suggestions below. This is John Russo saying, I'm not stranded, and neither are you. There are millions of us Americans standing together here in Centerfield. Until next week.